Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Wesson. I oversee recruiting for Salesforce.com in EMEA. I'm actually based here in London, originally from the US. My esteemed colleague that's going to join me on stage today is Ernest Ng, and he is the Senior Director of Analytics for recruiting. And he's based in San Francisco, and he clearly is the brains behind our operations. So before we get started, we want to say thank you for coming out and listening to us talk about how we're disrupting our talent acquisition strategies at Salesforce.com. I can't be certain that everything that Ernest and I are going to talk about today, or some of the case studies we're going to review, are necessarily going to be applicable to your specific situations. However, I think our hope is that when you walk away from this chat, is that you'll feel motivated or even more motivated to continue to challenge the norms of your recruiting and talent acquisition strategies at your companies. So you ready to kick this thing off?
Yeah.
All right. So it's probably a little bit easier for us, Ernest and I, to be disruptive. Salesforce, we feel, is a company that was based on disruptive technology in how we deliver our applications in enterprise software. We feel like we're disruptive in how we allow our customers to actually pay for the technology. Multi-tenancy for you that don't know what that is, and I certainly didn't know it when I started at Salesforce. It's basically a shared model. So think about it: if you're at an apartment, you can share utilities. If you can share cable, etc. And then the payment model basically is pay as you go, pay for what you actually use. So traditional enterprise software companies, it was you made a big upfront purchase, and whether you used it or not, they weren't really terribly concerned with. You paid for it, hopefully you'll use it. And then what's really near and dear to our hearts is our 1-1-1 model. Again, we think it's disruptive. It's 1% of our equity, 1% of our time, and 1% of our product. That was kicked off the moment Mark Benioff founded the company and started it, so he didn't have any equity. He only had a little bit of product, and he didn't have a whole lot of time because we only had a couple employees at the time. So again, it's easier for us, I think, to be disruptive, and we always continue to be disruptive. Again, we were born cloud. In order for us to stay ahead of our competition, so they don't leapfrog us, again, we have to be disruptive. So it starts with cloud. Chatter is our collaboration tool that's really taken off. Mobile is huge. And then the next thing that we announced at our Dreamforce conference in San Francisco back in October was our analytics cloud. And that's, quote unquote, the next wave of our disruptive technology. Pretty easy also to kind of recruit for Salesforce.com to a certain degree. We still have to be disruptive, but we're one of the world's fastest growing enterprise software companies. Forbes likes us. They think we're the most innovative company in the world. This is our fourth year in a row. So again, we like to think of ourselves as innovative. And then one of the best places to work. With all that for our recruiters, you would think, heck, make a phone call, pick up the line. They're going to come over here in droves. I wish that was the case. It certainly is not. So again, kicking off to be more disruptive.
Yeah. So all that success really starts with our customers' success. And when we think about customers' success, we think about what really drives that, and that's employee success, and that's employee engagement. If you have great employee engagement, you have people who go above and beyond the call of duty to really service those customers, right? But if you look at the research shows that a majority of people are not engaged in their work. This is a study by Gallup in 2013, surveying over 189 countries in the world, and it shows that 13% of employees are actually engaged in their work. That for us is a sort of interesting number. We don't necessarily believe that at Salesforce.com we have these types of numbers, but that doesn't mean we can rest on our successes, right? And that doesn't mean that anybody can rest on their successes if you have really great engagement. And so when we look at these numbers, when we think about how we go about recruiting, we realize that the traditional playbook in terms of how you recruit and the people that you bring in wasn't really going to cut it, and we had to take a fresh view of recruiting and of HR. And so that's really when we started to think about this idea of disruption, of how do we change the conversation from employees to actually looking at our employees as employees to looking at our employees as customers, right? Because ultimately, from an HR perspective and a recruiting perspective, they are our customers, right? And so how do we ensure that our employees are successful in their future and what they're currently doing? And so we really looked at being disruptive. And what I want to do first is sort of ground you in the idea of what disruption is, right? Disruption really is about finding new value networks, finding new markets, and really looking at places where incumbents have sort of ignored. So as Salesforce.com, we feel like we're pretty sizable, and we can, I think of ourselves as an incumbent in the space a little bit, in the software space. And what we wanted to do is really disrupt ourselves in fear of being disrupted by a lot of the new startups coming up, right? And so how do we go about doing that? It really starts with data first, and we lead with data in terms of trying to change the conversation and to try and change long-standing beliefs held by a lot of our executives, right? So what we're going to go through is really how we changed their beliefs using data, leading with data, right? Because typically, when I'm going to meet with an executive and it's my opinion versus their opinion, whose opinion typically wins? It's usually not my opinion, right? Because they're my boss, they run the company, they'll listen, but you might not be able to really change their mind. And that's what data really goes about doing, is it creates a little bit of cognitive dissonance in their mind to shake them out of their long-held beliefs so that you can start to influence them and start to change the conversation from you versus me to, okay, this is the problem, now let's go and solve the problem, right? And so what we wanted to do really is to give you sort of a quick roadmap in terms of how we think about disruption and how we think about using data to really start to get started on this. And so what we do at Salesforce.com is really apply a sort of research model in terms of all of the questions that we ask, right? We first want to identify the problem and understand the problem and the core of the problem. Then we go about sort of scouring everywhere for data to really start to understand what's going on. And then we start to form hypotheses and really test them with various statistical techniques, and to draw conclusions from those studies. And so I think for us, one of the biggest tips that we have really is to use multiple data sources. So while LinkedIn is a great data source for a lot of things, you have to use other data sources as well to triangulate your findings, or else you're really just siloed in terms of what you're talking about, right? And so for us, it's critical to use multiple data sources in order to really connect the dots for the business leaders and to really drive the story about what we're trying to tell, right? And so what we've done is we've invested a lot of time on the back end in terms of building out these databases for us so that we can compile all of this data and quickly query the data to test all of these hypotheses that we might have, right? The tip number 2, I think for us, would be to leverage other statistical techniques that your business might be using as well. So I don't like to create new things, I like to borrow. And so I just look for other parts of the business that already are very well versed in statistics and very well versed in using data to really attack the market, right? And so if you think about your employees and your potential future employees as customers, use those same techniques in terms of lead scoring. You can do candidate lead scoring. You can do, attrition prediction, like attrition prediction, or you can do inventory planning, like headcount planning, right? And so we try and leverage all of these techniques and apply them in the HR space, right? Because we have experts in the company that already do this, it lets us really move faster, right? And the third tip really is to be quick, but don't hurry. Meaning, move quick, fail fast, and keep an open mind, right? If you're really prepared in the way that you've set up your databases, in the way that you've really thought about what you want to accomplish, then you can really move quick versus being in a hurry and then just gathering data points from wherever you might find and just compiling it together in some sort of Frankenstein fashion, right? And so that's really how we got started and our mindset going into using data to really drive the conversation. And so what we'll go through is really 3 case studies about how we did that to really disrupt the recruiting space for us in terms of where we recruit, who we recruit, and how we recruit. And this really covers the gamut of the entire Salesforce.com, right? So in terms of where we recruit, that's really focused for us on the tech space, like our tech employees. And then who we recruit, that's like for our sales organization. And then how we recruit, that's really about our G&A functions. So we're using data across all of these different functions, and we're using it in different ways to attack different problems, because each group has different problems that they needed to solve, right? And so the first case is really where we're recruiting. What was happening in our tech space was that it was getting really hard to recruit great developers. We were getting rather high decline rates. And so when you get that situation, what usually happens, right? The leader will say, you got to pay them more money, right? Just throw the bank at them. That's probably not the best thing to do from a financial perspective. And so they're like, okay, you just got to get better recruiters, right? I'm sure everybody has heard that. Like, you just got to get better recruiters, or you got to get more recruiters, right? We thought we had pretty good recruiters, but we were still getting decline rates and things like that. And it's just, the conversation was just all about money and recruiting, right? And it wasn't really about, okay, what does the market look like? And so what we did is we used a lot of LinkedIn data to look at total addressable market. And then we also married that with our ATS data that showed how many people that we actually touched, right? How many people that we contacted, had an interview with us, declined us, or actually we declined them, right? And so we were able to put that together to really show what you have here, right? That in the Bay Area, right, we've actually pursued 23% of all the qualified candidates. So we used a very crazy Boolean search in LinkedIn to find all of this addressable market. And we realized that we touched, 23% of all of them. And obviously, that's a fairly small percentage of the entire 100%, but we like to think about hiring the top 20%, raising the talent bar, as you heard maybe yesterday. And so we came with this data to the heads of technology, and then they were like, okay, so now what, right? Instead of saying, pay them more money. That's not the case, right? We touched 23% of the Bay Area population already, right? And so we have to think about a new strategy, right? And so they had this conversation over and over again, and what we decided upon using the data was really to go and establish beachheads in other areas of of North America, right? So we finally, after years and years of only in San Francisco, bring them only to San Francisco, we were able to really change the conversation to say, okay, there are a lot of other markets still competitive, but we have not yet entered that market, and so we have a better chance now than San Francisco, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's really how we led the conversation, is we led the conversation with data from LinkedIn, data from our ATS, data from just market research in terms of the number of jobs and things like that. And it essentially sort of changed the game. And so we are definitely going to be heading to some of those locations and growing in those locations versus just growing in San Francisco. So that's definitely a great use case about how we use data to change the conversation. Mm-hmm.
I always get a little bit touchy. Being an American, I'm moved over here from London, or to London. Now I consider myself, part of the EMEA family. So when HQ puts these presentations together and they can't plop up a nice map of EMEA, they have to stick a map of North America up there. So we're doing the same things in EMEA. We're figuring out like where we can grow from not only a market share, right, but our executive leadership team in EMEA also wants to know, like, if we double down in North Africa, what's going to be the candidate pool look like? And so when I first got here, I sit down and I'm sitting down with the president of EMEA, and he looks at me and he says, he's Spanish, and he goes, "Jim," I say, "Yeah." And he goes, "We are $1 billion company here in EMEA." "Yep." "We have 2,100 employees." "Yep, got that." "I want to grow to $5 billion and 10,600 employees in 5 years. How are you going to do that?" I was like, "Right, Ernest, where's Ernest?" So quickly get on the phone with Ernest, start talking about, what is the candidate pool really look like? We want to continue to hire the top 20, 25%. And here in EMEA, and I think you guys will all agree, we have a scarcity problem, right? I mean, we've already, based on that map behind me, we've already really kind of tapped out Oracle, which we'd love to recruit from Oracle, but we think we've kind of tapped that out. We've really started to we've tapped out Microsoft. We've kind of starting to tap out IBM. So we can't keep fishing from the same candidate pool and expect the kind of talent that we want. So we really had to start to take this data, okay, and go to the executive leadership team and say, listen, it can't always be an Oracle rep. It can't always be an IBMer. It can't be somebody from SAP. And again, to Ernest's point, that data really helps drive that conversation so they don't just look at me like, you're crazy. Oracle's got thousands and thousands of account executives in EMEA, et cetera. So again, data has really helped us define like where we're going to go for our talent. The other thing we've done is we have to decide who are we going to go after. And again, data helps us with this. When I first started with the company 8 years ago, it was always software. They have to have software. When we were talking about sales executives, which this company is by far and away a sales-driven, high-growth, make-it-happen in sales kind of company. And we feel that more AEs on the street equals more revenue, period, end of story. So we're hiring hundreds and hundreds of AEs across the globe every year. Again, it was always, they have to have software sales experience. And so we started to think, we're going to be tapped out. I mean, we're not, 10,000 employees, 20,000 employees worldwide, et cetera. We're going to be tapped out. So we started to look a little closer at, like, really what are the characteristics of a successful AE in this company? And lo and behold, we found out, especially in our commercial business unit, it's not necessarily software. So we instantly expanded our candidate pool. And what we found is that monthly cadence, we drive this business on a monthly cadence. Even recruiting, it's how many people you're putting in the seats on a monthly basis. CRM, they use a CRM tool, so they understand CRM. And there's other things, but those are just some of the things. But again, my point is that we were able to really expand the candidate pool. And believe it or not, now as we can do a look back on the data, looking at our top 100 reps in our commercial business unit, 33 of those reps don't have any software sales experience. That was never, ever part of the conversation a couple of years ago. Now, Some of our most successful sales teams are made up of people that don't necessarily have software experience. The other thing that we're doing is recruiting has always been about, right, efficiency. You're always being asked, how can we be more efficient, et cetera? Well, culture to us is huge. We live it, we breathe it, we preach it when we're recruiting candidates. We're always looking at, like, are they a cultural fit? Above anything else, almost. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time we talked about culture in an interview process or in a meeting, I wouldn't be up here on stage. So what we've done is, because it's so key to who we are, and we want our employees to be successful, we want them to be engaged, we've initiated a social ambassador program. And what this basically is an individual that we insert into the interview process. He or she has no stake at all in this hire. But he or she, what they do have is a true understanding of what it takes to be successful at Salesforce.com and what it takes to kind of fit into our culture. So they go in and they have the ability to say yes or no, even though they have no stake in the hire. But again, it helps us make sure that we're bringing in the best talent that's going to stick around, and talent that's going to allow our customers to be successful, hence our company be successful. So that's one of the things we're doing. It's not necessarily the most efficient when you invite somebody into your process, and it certainly challenges the norms. But what we think it does is it makes us more effective in hiring and bringing in that right talent.
Yeah, and so when you do that, and when you sort of disrupt this efficient process of like hiring with somebody who's not a part of the hiring panel or of the department, you want to ensure that you don't leave anything to chance, right? You don't want to leave culture to chance. Once you've done this, and you're saying we're putting a huge bet on culture, and we're making our process less efficient because we value culture, you have to ensure that that's a successful platform. So what we've done is actually we've created these onboarding journeys for our new hires. So every new hire, from pre-hire to first 90 days, will get automated emails sent to them covering a whole range of cultural topics, from tips, tricks, like what are the acronyms that you need to know, and also like how to do your goal planning, everything that you need to know to become truly a part of Salesforce. That's all sent automatically to them through a marketing platform that we have in-house. So again, it sort of goes back to this idea of treating our employees like customers. So if you think of your employees as customers, this is what we do, and this is the software that we sell to customers, right? Marketing automation. And we're doing the same way, the same thing to our employees, right? And you would think that with this barrage of emails that they would not open them up. But actually, what we're able to see through the data is that 85% open rates on these types of marketing emails. That's huge. That's 3 times the percentage of a traditional marketing email, right? And what that showed us really is that people were thirsty for this information, and people wanted to become part of the culture, and they were looking for any type of information to help them become a part of the culture, right? And so when you do that, what happens really is that you have really engaged employees because they're part of the culture, they love the culture, they live the culture, they breathe the culture, right? Because first impressions are always the strongest impressions, and so that's why we created those journeys. Because this is the result of when you get really engaged employees, is when we got number 7 on Best Places to Work, that was a big day for us. And actually what happened was all of our employees just entirely blew up the social sphere, right? So we had 3.5 million impressions on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook telling everybody in their network that, yeah, Salesforce is number 7 best place to work, right? And what that did is that drove job board traffic, 330% increase in job board traffic that day, right? And the highest applicant day ever, right? In the history of Salesforce, right? And so it's really amazing when you get great culture and you don't leave culture to chance, is you have these incredible referral rates. You have these people really wanting to share about Salesforce, and eventually it pays off. You know, it might not be the most efficient, but it is definitely effective when you get this type of result. And so I really hope that you sort of took some things away.
Yeah, I think to Ernest's point, you bring in the right people, they fit into your culture, they have passion for what they do, they believe in what we're doing as a company, they fit in, they're excited, they're engaged. As Ernest referenced, our referral rate is, believe it or not, is 50%. So 50% of the people we bring into the company are referred by employees. We have no problem paying referral fees. It's what we do to really help us. And this data also allows us, and this engagement from our employees makes it a little bit easier to go out there and find the level of talent that we want. It's extremely hard out there, as you guys know, as your teams know. Every day you're battling for the right people to bring into your companies to make them successful. And we'll take anything we can to help us in that kind of fight. But it all has to kind of start with data, knowing where you're going, who you're going after, and how you're going to go after them. And most of the executives that we deal with, I think you'll all agree, great people, smart people, but I'm not so sure they get recruiting. I don't know if they necessarily get talent acquisition. And so to take the emotion out of those conversations and lead with data, these executives love data, is really, really important. And I think LinkedIn is a very good partner in helping us do that. So that's our presentation. I hope you are motivated a little bit to kind of challenge the norms of your recruiting organizations, your talent acquisition strategies. It is working. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of data. So I'll open up the floor to questions. There's a couple mics in the back. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay?
You mentioned having a social ambassador in the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
How do you train them to make sure that they don't just make the decision based on whether or not they like the person's face or
Yeah.
So the question is, we have this social ambassador program. How do we train them to ensure that they're just not fulfilling their own biases? So these are like Salesforce lifers. They are people that we truly trust as being champions for Salesforce and Salesforce culture. And so obviously there's like a panel and things like that, and they're one voice in there, but they are a significant voice in there. And so there's not necessarily regimented training. It's just they've been nominated as, you know, Salesforce ambassadors. They know the culture, and everybody on the team also understands that, okay, this person's a Salesforce person, right? And so we're still, even though we're pretty big, we're still a pretty tight-knit group, and everybody sort of knows everybody in some sense.
Yeah, I think they're not going in there with the idea that they're gonna talk about, you know, characteristics of, you know, or skill sets and things like that. They're really just going to try to get to know that person, how they, you know, what kind of passion they have, how they're interacting with the group. But I think we make it pretty clear, like, let's not go down that path of, you know, skill sets and things like that. Let's just get to know that person and figure out, you know, if you got a good kind of, I hate to say it, kind of vibe, you know, and go from there.
Follow-up question: how do you measure cultural fit? Has it been in play long enough to see it before and after?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we measure cultural fit? So how we came up with these cultural characteristics, or the cultural characteristics that you saw, is what we did is we took a psychometric inventory of the top 100 leaders in our company. And what we did from there is we ran various factor analyses to find, you know, various factors and to come up with these specific characteristics. And so we're implementing some systems in place, like scorecards and things like that for the interview process to sort of rate people on some of this stuff. And so that's really what we're starting to do, is we're starting to develop a system where we can actually measure this on a consistent basis with the people participating in this program, so we could actually evaluate the effectiveness of it. So this is still a work in progress. We are definitely gung-ho about it. We believe that this will actually play out and pay out, but we are still in the test phase, right?
I have a question. You mentioned that you're going for 20% of top people, but then you mentioned that your best salespeople actually, I understood that you were using companies where the people come from as a criteria to see whether they're top 20. And then you say that your best people now come from other places. Yeah. How, using LinkedIn, you see that these are top 20? I mean, what do you choose?
Yeah, so the way that we look at top 20 is what we did is we looked at our top 100 account executives, right? That's based on performance, based on their annual attainment, all of that kind of stuff. And then what we did is we looked at their background. We looked at their LinkedIn profile. We looked at some other characteristics, and that's what we found. We found that they all came from companies that had a monthly cadence, right? They all came from companies that were big Salesforce users. We have that data because we know who's a Salesforce user, right? And then they all had Sandler training or storytelling training as well. So that's all sort of on their CV, right? And so it was a bit of a laborious task to actually look at all 100 of these top account executives, look at their resumes, look at their LinkedIn, look at all of their other data that they have public, right? And then really try and piece together all of these findings together. And eventually, those were the commonalities that we found in our top account executives. So the question is, once we tapped that pool in terms of our top 100, how do we move to the other? So the top 100 is so they're already at Salesforce, right? So they're already part of Salesforce. And what it was is really coming up with a profile. And now we can go and we can interview based on that profile, right? We can base our search algorithms and things like that based on those characteristics versus typing into LinkedIn, software sales, X amount of years of experience, and just narrowing the pool to be those things, right? So now the pool is much bigger, and they still have to go through the interview process and demonstrate their capabilities, but our pool is much bigger now.
Yeah, I think that's the point we're trying to make there, is that before it was always about you had to have software sales experience. I mean, that was a given. It was a non-negotiable. And so based on what we started to look at, some of the data, we realized that that's not necessarily true. Now, that doesn't mean that people that come in that have software sales experience fail. I mean, there's still a lot out there, but we were hoping that we could expand the candidate pool and start to get away from our traditional competitors, because we were feeling like we had tapped those resources pretty thoroughly. So the point we're trying to make is that by looking at the qualities of these successful individuals and finding out what the commonalities were, it would allow us to kind of start to look at other pools of candidates, whether, let's say, just for example, telecommunications. We never would have hired people from telecommunications companies. Now we do. We never probably would have hired people from research companies like Gardner, and we do hire those people. So we never did before. Now we have the ability to do that because we know that there is a good chance that they'll be successful, and we can kind of get away from, to a certain degree, some of our more traditional companies that we were pulling from.
So I can tell you that one good example of that is some of our top sales executives come from the mortgage industry, so selling mortgages. Another one was a chocolate salesman. So they sold chocolate into like big retailers. And then another one was Prada. They sold Prada. So, or no, not Prada, Dolce & Gabbana. So they sold Dolce & Gabbana. So those are the types of candidates that we would have never thought about looking at before. But
yeah. And that case study was done in our commercial business. We have two units in sales. We have commercial, which is like 1,000 employees and below, and we have enterprise, which is 1,000 and above. So the enterprise sales executives, very complex selling, very strategic solution selling. They can be long sales cycles where you're bringing in a lot of different decision makers and influencers. On the commercial side, which is it's kind of our engine. I mean, but it's also very highly transactional. You're selling to very small businesses. You might be selling to medium-sized businesses, but that's the market they go after. And so in that case study, those individuals we always thought had to have software. Well, that's not the case, as kind of Ernest was referencing. On the enterprise side, the data is really showing us, for the most part, that they really do have to have software sales experience. So the argument that we're going on the enterprise side probably won't play out as well as it has played out on the commercial side.
Hi. First of all, thank you. It was very insightful. As I was thinking through your business model, the core of it, I understand, is being a bit disruptive and also big innovators. And of course, you've been recognized for that as well. And then research shows us that diversity plays a key role in, becoming more innovative. And I understand, this is core for you. Yeah. But then you've mentioned that roughly 50% of your hires come from referral programs, and you've mentioned also, the super ambassador, bringing someone to be looking at the DNA of the people you're going to be bringing in. How do you foresee that you're going to balance that challenge of, bringing in, varied views and different people and diverse people with the fact, that you are going to be innovative in the future?
Right. That's a good question, and it's one that we're really grappling with right now. I think diversity, employee diversity or workforce diversity is a pretty hot topic, especially gender diversity. So we're starting to look at that to see what we can do as a company to kind of take the bias out of, when you have a more of a male-dominated company, they're going to be biased to continue to hire people that are like themselves. So we are taking a very good look at what we're doing as a company to bring in a more diverse work culture. And there's going to be a lot of education that's going to have to happen. There's going to be a lot of awareness that's going to have to happen. It's like we're on the tip of the iceberg as far as what we need to do as an organization. It's very, very high on Mark Benioff's radar that we have to create a more diverse workforce. I think it starts off, though, really with a lot of awareness and education. And we're just starting that. Last week we had a huge panel that discussed this, and we're actually just in the process of rolling out a recommendation to the executive leadership team in EMEA. So it's very early, and it's certainly something that we're very aware of and we have to address, but I don't think we necessarily have right now a true solution to make sure that we satisfy that requirement, because it's a very, very hot topic. And I don't necessarily think, honestly, it's a recruiting issue, to be blunt. That was something that I've been challenged with. It's always like, bring more women into the company, bring more women into the company. Well, we are bringing women into the company, right? But we have to do some other things internally as well to be more attractive and make sure that we take care of the diverse candidates that we're bringing in and kind of create a more inclusive culture. So.
Yeah, that's definitely been on top of mind for our entire leadership team across the globe. Is how do you? So you can bring in all the females that you want, but if the culture is not at a state where it's like good for them, it's never going to work, right? And so What we've done now is that a lot of the leaders have identified it as not an HR problem, like what Tim was saying, and they've taken it upon themselves to really be the champions of it within their own organizations, and that's what we're trying to do, is trying to think about a grassroots way of creating that culture around diversity and inclusion versus a top-down type of mandate. Because you can mandate these things, but if the ground is not fertile for diversity and inclusion to take root, it's all these top-down mandates aren't going to work. So we're trying to look at it from a bottoms-up perspective instead of a tops-down perspective.
Hey, so my question is that when we talk about success profiles, okay, we saw that we evaluate the characteristics of the top performers of a company, but how difficult or how much have you found it easy to go out and benchmark with your competitors, or with what is the norm of the industry, that for a sales engineer you need X, Y, Z, has been like the proven best profile? How easy or difficult do you think is that?
We haven't necessarily benchmarked these profiles against our competitors. What we know is what works for Salesforce, and I think Salesforce is a fairly unique company in terms of its culture, what it values, and also just our sales cycles, right? Monthly cadence. There's not a lot of companies that work the same way. In terms of within the software space, in terms of what we would be benchmarking against. I guess we can benchmark against like non-software, non-tech as well, but what we really did is we looked inward first, and we really tried to figure out what works best for our situation, our company, because I do think that the problems and the challenges that we face are sort of unique. I mean, we're growing at 30% year over year, and so what other company would we benchmark against in that space, right? And who has that same challenge, right?
Hi there.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, it's a bit of a tactical question. The tech location strategy, when you've identified these other locations, were they areas that you already had premises in, or have you literally just gone for where the talent is?
Correct. So what we did is we looked at locations where we had a small presence in. The strategy has always been to bring all tech talent to San Francisco, because that's the hotbed of innovation, right? And I don't necessarily I feel like that's a little arrogant, and so that's what we tried to break that myth, and we tried to show that there is talent elsewhere, and that we can grow in those areas. And so we really focused on places where we actually had a small presence, and to really convince them, to convince the leaders that you need to invest more in those areas, because one, it will reduce the time to fill, right? And two, it will open up those markets as well. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm really excited about the idea of leading with data. I think that's new for me. So apart from LinkedIn and your ATS, where do you get your data?
So we get our data from our HRIS as well. So we use Workday. We also have data within our CRM system within Salesforce, where we get a lot of performance data for our sales account executives. And we go where the data is, right? And my team essentially goes out and we scour the company for data and what we can add to our database. It's a little sort of like a big data exercise for us as well, in terms of all of the data that we can potentially look at. So right now we're in exploratory phases for some of our social network data that we have in Chatter, as well, doing some sentiment analysis or natural language processing to really understand how people are feeling on their day-to-day. And so those are all sort of the data sources that we look at. And if you think about it, there's a ton of data out there on your employees and potentially on your future candidates as well. And so it's just about how you feel about using the data. So we've made some philosophical decisions about what data we want to use and what data that we don't want to use. And so we just have to work within those philosophical constraints.
Who puts together your culture playbook and the content for your employee email marketing campaigns?
So we have a new hire experience team that's a cross-functional team between HR, IT, and marketing. And so it's a cross-functional team that touches all parts of the business. And so they work together to put together the emails, how to deliver it, when to deliver it. And so we're always sort of testing when to deliver certain emails and things like that. So that's an exciting new phase that I think we're going to be exploring in the future, like A/B testing in terms of performance and things like that. So.
Hi, I have a question. Actually, I have two questions. So, how it was decided that your function is going to be necessary for the for future success of Salesforce? So, was there kind of a top-down initiative to create a data scientist or insight person? And then once you have had the data, what kind of approach did you undertaken to convince your business stakeholders about importance of this data? Did you do the training? Was it more like a recruiter to hiring manager kind of a discussion, or was it more like a top-down cascading strategy? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think from a data perspective, we are a data-driven culture. We are a data-driven company, and when we look at the business of recruiting and HR as sort of from the customer lens, right, versus just a back office type of function, that's really what changed the conversation and had us really start to invest in data science teams and my team that really looks at analytics and strategy and things like that. So that really is sort of where we felt HR was going in terms of data science and looking at data, and that's how we made that bet. And then the thing is, the leaders of the company are looking for this data. We have yet, historically, HR has not been able to provide that data to them in a way that they're accustomed to, right? From a marketing or a customer standpoint, right? They look at that data all the time, and they look at these total addressable market studies all the time. But as an HR function, we weren't necessarily able to give that to them because we didn't have the skills in-house within the HR function. But now, at least within Salesforce, we have that ability, and we have the ability to shape those conversations. My team is essentially myself, some statistics people, some former consultants, all of that kind of stuff. So it's a little in-house consulting team. So that's how we did it. Your second question being?
Was once you have had the data, how difficult was to drive these conversations with hiring managers and
Got it.
show them the
Yeah.
importance?
I think it was a top-down approach. And I think those conversations started at the executive level, right, in our executive management meetings, and it started to come and cascade down. But then I also think, our recruiters and recruiting leaders on the ground also had access to that data, and they started to educate and inform the people on the street, and it kind of cascaded up as well. So I think it was a top-down, kind of bottom-up approach, and we kind of met in the middle.
I think what happens is when you have data and when you lead with data, people get curious, right? and people start asking questions, and that's what the conversation is about. It's instead of the leader telling you something or the recruiter telling the leader something, it's about a conversation, because now you have a piece of data which you can both look at and you can both have a conversation around, and share opinions and things like that, versus me telling you, I'm telling him or her telling me, right? And so that's really what it's about. It's not necessarily tops down, bottoms up, but it's about leading with data, presenting the data in a way that tells a good story, and then having that conversation and changing the conversation from me telling you.
It changes the conversation. The conversation becomes much more productive, much more effective. A lot of the data is irrefutable, so it's makes our jobs a lot easier dealing with our clients. So.
Hi, I really liked your hashtag Dream Job campaign.
Uh-huh.
How successful was that, and how did you come up with it?
It was just, I think it's been pretty successful in terms of what we try and espouse in terms of creating dream jobs for everybody. That was the brainchild of our former SVP of HR in terms of what are we trying to accomplish. We know it's a job, we know that you're an employee, but we want to make it your dream job, right? And everything that sort of we built was built around that concept and that idea about allowing everybody to have their dream job. Whether it was the analytics and things like that, that was all pushed by this idea that engaged employees are successful employees, and engaged employees are the ones that are in their dream job, right? Any other questions?
Okay, I'm getting a sign, so.
It's over.
It's over. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.